The bell begins to ring long before you notice it. Not loudly, not urgently. Just enough to drift across the rooftops and settle into the quiet spaces between thoughts. It moves through the narrow streets of Rome as the evening exhales. Stone walls that have held centuries of secrets seem to soften under the sound. Windows glow faintly. Curtains sway barely. Somewhere far away, a footstep slows, as if even the ground itself is listening. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to go. If you'd like, you can imagine yourself standing at the edge of one of those old streets, the kind polished smooth by time rather than footsteps. The air is cool but kind. It carries the faint memory of incense, wine, and warm stone that has absorbed the sun all day. Rome is not asleep yet, but it is no longer awake. This is the hour the city has always loved most. That quiet moment when history loosens its grip and allows itself to simply exist. As you breathe in slowly, you may notice how nothing here asks anything of you. The city does not demand understanding. It does not insist on attention. It only offers presence, steady, patient, and unhurried. Lantern light spills softly across a long corridor near the Vatican. The flame flickers just enough to remind you it is alive, but never enough to disturb the calm. Shadows stretch and rest against the walls like old companions who have walked this path many times before. Somewhere beyond the arches, laughter drifts through the night. Not loud laughter, just a brief distant sound, the kind that fades before you can decide who it belongs to. It does not pull you toward it. It simply exists, like a memory passing through. You may feel your shoulders relax without being told to do so. Rome has that effect. This city has watched empires rise and settle into dust, yet it never rushes the evening. It has learned something rare, that time moves more gently when no one tries to control it. As night deepens, the scent of the day lingers. A trace of perfume remains on the air, mingling with old wood and stone. Somewhere nearby, velvet drapes brush against a balcony rail, catching the breeze as if greeting it politely. Everything feels slower now. If you listen closely, you might notice your own breathing aligning with the city's rhythm, in and out. There is no reason to hurry. There hasn't been for a very long time. This Rome is not the Rome of textbooks or monuments. It is the Rome of pauses, of spaces between words, of moments that were never recorded because they were never meant to be remembered, only lived. Centuries ago, people walked these same streets at the same hour. They carried thoughts home with them, regrets, hopes, quiet joys. None of those feelings vanished. They simply settled into the stones, waiting patiently for someone to pass by and feel them again. Tonight, that someone can be you. As the bell's echo dissolves into silence, another sound replaces it. The soft hush of fabric, the murmur of conversation behind closed doors, the subtle creak of wood responding to cooler air. These sounds do not interrupt the calm. They deepen it. This is the hour when the city removes its masks. Power rests. Ceremony sleeps. What remains is something deeply human. You may imagine a candle being set down somewhere nearby. The flame steadies itself. Light pulls gently across a table where nothing urgent waits to be done. A hand lingers for a moment before withdrawing, as if reluctant to disturb the quiet. There is a feeling here, difficult to name, that everything unfinished can wait until morning. Rome has always understood this. The night does not erase the past. It holds it carefully. It allows stories to breathe without asking them to perform. Even the grandest histories grow soft under candlelight, becoming something more intimate, more forgiving. As you continue listening, there is no need to remember names or dates. Tonight is not about remembering. It is about drifting. And somewhere within this calm, a gentle curiosity begins to form, not sharp, not demanding, just a quiet wondering. How did so many lives pass through these streets and leave behind something that still feels warm? What remains when ambition fades and only presence endures? You don't need answers now. The questions themselves are enough. They open a door slowly into a journey that unfolds at its own pace. For now, let the city hold you. Let the stone and light and distant bells do what they have always done. Remind the restless mind that it is safe to rest. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to TDU's History for Sleep. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. And as the candle burns lower and the streets grow even quieter, the story is only just beginning. Somewhere ahead, a path waits, not to lead you forward, but to invite you inward. Rome has a way of revealing itself slowly, never all at once, as if it understands that the human heart opens best when it is not hurried. And as the night deepens, the city seems to lean closer, inviting you to notice the lives that once moved gently beneath these same stones, not emperors or conquerors, but ordinary people whose days unfolded in small, human rhythms, people who woke with the sun, rested when shadows grew long, and trusted the evening to carry their thoughts away. And if you imagine walking now along a narrow street where the stones are cool beneath your feet, you might feel how time has worn them smooth, not through violence or force, but through repetition, through patience, through centuries of simple passage. And there is something comforting in that knowledge, that even the hardest surfaces soften when touched often enough by quiet persistence. And long ago, at this same hour, a shopkeeper may have been closing wooden shutters, pausing for a moment to breathe in the scent of bread still warm from the oven nearby, while somewhere above, a small lamp was being lit in the window where a family gathered without ceremony, speaking softly, sharing the last moments of the day, without realizing that these ordinary evenings would one day become part of a much larger memory. And the city holds them all, every sigh, every unspoken hope, every tired smile, layered gently like pages in a book that never needs to be read in order to be meaningful. And as you listen now, there is no need to picture grand events or famous names, because Rome at night is not interested in spectacle. It prefers the quiet dignity of continuity, the way life repeats itself in subtle variations. A footstep here, a whisper there, the soft scrape of a chair being moved closer to the fire. And if your thoughts begin to wander, that is perfectly fine, because wandering is part of the journey, just as it was for those who lived here before. People who wondered about the future while trusting the night to hold their questions safely until morning. And perhaps there was once a young scribe who walked home under this same sky, carrying scrolls filled with words that would outlast him. Yet his mind was not on legacy, but on the simple comfort of returning to familiar walls, to the sound of water poured into a basin, to the relief of setting burdens down. And history often forgets these moments. Yet they are the ones that shape the soul of a place, and Rome knows this, which is why it grows quiet instead of loud as darkness settles. And as you breathe slowly, you may notice how your own thoughts begin to soften, how the sharp edges of the day blur into something more forgiving, because the night does not ask you to resolve anything. It only asks you to be present, and in this presence, there is a gentle discovery unfolding. The realization that history is not only written in marble and ink, but in pauses in evenings like this. One where nothing extraordinary happens, yet everything feels complete, and the city ancient and patient continues to offer this lesson without words, reminding anyone who listens that life does not need to be dramatic to be meaningful, that rest itself is a form of wisdom. And as the streets grow quieter still and the lanterns burn lower, Rome seems to whisper that you are allowed to let go just as countless others have done before you, trusting the night to carry what you no longer need. And with that trust, a deeper calm begins to settle, preparing the way for what lies gently ahead, where memory and time will meet not in conflict, but in quiet understanding. As the night settles more deeply into Rome, there is a sense that time itself has changed its pace, no longer counting minutes or marking hours, but flowing instead like a wide, patient river that carries everything gently along. And if you imagine yourself sitting somewhere quiet now, perhaps on a worn stone step that still holds the warmth of the day, you might feel how the city encouraged stillness without effort, how even the most restless thoughts begin to loosen when surrounded by something so enduring and calm. And long ago, others sat exactly like this, not knowing they were participating in history, only knowing that the evening felt kind, that the air moved softly against their skin, that for a moment they were free from the demands of the world, and Rome absorbed those moments the way earth absorbs rain, without judgment, without haste, simply allowing them to sink in and become part of its deeper memory. And as you listen now, you may notice how the idea of time begins to feel different. Less like something chasing you forward and more like something you are floating within, supported rather than pushed. And this is one of the quiet lessons the city offers. That time does not always need to be measured. Sometimes it only needs to be felt, and centuries ago, monks walked slowly through cloisters lit by oil lamps, their footsteps echoing gently as they moved in unison with the night, not rushing, not lingering, but trusting the rhythm that had guided generations before them. And elsewhere, artisans rested their hands after a long day of careful work, knowing that what was left unfinished would wait patiently, because tomorrow was not an enemy but a continuation. And there is comfort in imagining that nothing truly urgent lives in the dark, that the night exists to soften what the day has tightened. And as you breathe out, perhaps you can feel that softening happening within you as well, the quiet release of expectations, the gentle permission to pause. And Rome, with its layers of stone and memory, stands as proof that pausing does not mean disappearing, that rest does not erase meaning. In fact, it often deepens it, and somewhere nearby, water flows through an ancient fountain. It sounds steady and unchanging, reminding anyone who listens that movement does not have to be fast to be constant. That continuity is built through patience rather than force. And this realization arrives not as a sudden insight, but as a slow understanding that unfolds naturally, like eyes adjusting to low light. And you may find that your thoughts no longer need to resolve themselves, that questions can remain unanswered without causing discomfort, because the night is spacious enough to hold them all. And Rome seems to breathe alongside you, its presence reassuring, its silence full rather than empty. And in this shared quiet, something subtle happens. A small shift from seeking to simply being, from holding on to letting rest. And the city has witnessed this shift countless times, in travelers, in residents, in anyone who allowed themselves to slow down enough to notice it. And now it offers the same gentle invitation to you to let time pass without watching it, to let the story unfold without anticipating its end, trusting that each moment leads naturally to the next, just as the night gradually deepens without needing to be told how. And as this understanding settles, the path ahead becomes clearer, not because it is illuminated brightly, but because it no longer needs to be. And with this calm awareness, you are ready to drift a little further, following the city into a deeper layer of quiet, where memory and meaning continue to reveal themselves at their own unhurried pace. As the night grows quieter still, Rome seems to reveal another layer of itself, one that exists not in stone or shadow, but in memory. And this memory does not arrive as a list of events or names, it arrives as a feeling, a gentle awareness that countless lives have passed through the same darkness, each carrying their own private worlds, their own hopes and disappointments, their own moments of calm very much like this one. And if you imagine walking now beneath a row of lanterns glowing softly along a curved street, you might sense how their light does not banish the dark but coexists with it, creating pockets of warmth where the mind can rest. And long ago, these lanterns, or their earlier forms, guided people home after evenings spent in conversation, prayer, or quiet work, and no one hurried beneath them, because the night did not feel threatening, it felt protective, like a wide cloak drawn gently around the city. And in this atmosphere, memories had space to surface without demand. A childhood laugh recalled in passing, a familiar face remembered without longing, just acknowledgement. And Rome absorbed these memories as easily as it absorbed footsteps, allowing them to settle into its deeper layers, where they remain accessible not as facts but as sensations. And perhaps this is why being here, even in imagination, can stir something within you that feels both distant and familiar, as though you are remembering something you never personally lived, yet somehow recognize. And this recognition is not unsettling, it is comforting, because it suggests that human experience, across centuries, shares a quiet continuity. And as you listen now, You may notice your own memories drifting in, uninvited yet welcome, moments from your life that surface gently, without sharp edges, moments that ask nothing more than to be acknowledged before drifting back into rest. And this is exactly how the city holds its past, not clinging, not discarding, simply allowing, and somewhere nearby, behind a closed door. An old book rests on a wooden table, its pages yellowed, its spine worn, and it contains stories that were once urgent to someone, yet now sleep peacefully, content in their silence, and this image mirrors the way thoughts can settle when given permission, how even the busiest minds can grow quiet when they are not pressured to perform. And Rome, patient teacher that it is, offers this lesson night after night, demonstrating that stillness is not emptiness, that silence can be full-layered alive, and as the lantern light flickers gently, you may feel a subtle shift, a sense that you are no longer merely listening to a story, but resting within it, carried along without effort. And this resting state opens a door to a deeper understanding, that memory does not exist to weigh us down, but to remind us that we belong to a larger flow of time, one that has room for pause, reflection, and peace. And the city, having witnessed countless generations come and go, seems to whisper that nothing essential is ever truly lost. It simply changes form, becoming part of the atmosphere, the rhythm, the quiet reassurance that life continues softly, even when we are not watching. And with this awareness, the night feels even safer, more expansive, inviting you to let go a little more, to trust that whatever you set down now will still be there if needed. And perhaps you sense that the journey is gently deepening, moving not toward an end, but toward a more profound calm, where the past and present blend seamlessly, preparing you for the next soft unfolding that awaits just beyond the lantern light. As the night continues to unfold, Rome seems to invite you a little deeper, not into mystery or grandeur, but into a quiet awareness of how gently history can rest when it is no longer asked to prove itself. And if you imagine standing now in a small open square, one that has existed for centuries without ever demanding attention, you might feel how the stones beneath you hold a certain warmth that does not come from the day alone, but from the countless evenings that have passed across them. Evenings filled with unremarkable moments that somehow became enduring simply by being lived, and there is something profoundly calming in realizing that history is not only made of decisive actions and loud declarations, but a repeated stillness of people pausing, breathing, listening to the same night sounds you hear now and long ago. A traveler may have stood here weary from the road, setting down a bag, loosening tired shoulders, feeling relief, not because the journey was complete, but because for this moment, it did not need to continue, and the city received that relief without comment, adding it quietly to its ever-growing depth. And as you listen, you may sense how Rome carries history not as a burden, but as a gentle weight, one that grounds rather than presses down, reminding those within it that life moves forward, even when nothing seems to be happening. And this realization arrives softly, like a truth you already knew but had forgotten how to feel. And somewhere nearby, an old wall reflects the lantern light unevenly, its surface marked by time, yet unbroken. And this wall has seen centuries of change without needing to react, teaching by example that endurance does not require resistance, only presence. And perhaps your own thoughts begin to mirror this stillness, settling into a quieter pattern, less concerned with outcomes. More content to exist in the moment as it is, and Rome seems to encourage this shift, offering no answers, only atmosphere, only the reassurance that being here, even in imagination, is enough. And as the hours move on without being counted, the city's past and present seem to overlap gently, not competing, not contradicting, but coexisting in a way that feels natural. And this coexistence carries a subtle message that every life, no matter how ordinary it may seem, adds something lasting to the whole, even if it leaves no visible mark, and this understanding can feel deeply comforting, especially when the day has been filled with effort and expectation, because it suggests that meaning is not something to be chased, but something that accumulates quietly through presence, through small acts of living. And as you breathe slowly, you may feel a sense of relief in this idea, a permission to release the need to accomplish, to explain, to resolve, and the night, patient and wide, holds this release gently, allowing it to settle without disturbance. And Rome, having practiced this for centuries, stands as a silent companion in the process, reminding anyone who listens that even the greatest stories are made of countless calm moments, strung together not by urgency, but by time itself. And as this awareness deepens, the journey begins to shift subtly, moving away from observation and toward a more intimate connection, where history is no longer something you learn about, but something you rest within, preparing you for the next quiet turning, where understanding will give way to acceptance, and acceptance will slowly dissolve into a deeper, more effortless calm. As the night reaches its deepest stillness, there is a sense that Rome is no longer simply surrounding you, but listening alongside you, as though the city itself has become aware of your quiet presence and chosen to share the silence rather than fill it. And if you imagine pausing now beneath an old archway, one softened by centuries of passing lives, you might feel how sound behaves differently here. Footsteps seem to dissolve more quickly, voices lose their edges, and even your own breathing feels absorbed into something larger, something patient and calm. And long ago, others paused in similar places, not because they were lost, but because they felt an unspoken invitation to stop moving for a moment, to let the world come to them instead of pressing forward. And in those pauses, something subtle often happened. A thought settled, a worry loosened, a quiet understanding emerged without effort. And Rome, with its long memory, seems to remember these moments more clearly than any grand event, as if it knows that true meaning often arrives not through action, but through receptivity. And as you listen now, you may notice how the story itself begins to feel less like something being told, and more like something being shared. A mutual quiet between listener and place, where neither demands attention, yet both are fully present. And this shared presence carries a gentle comfort, the kind that does not need explanation, because it speaks directly to something deeply human, something that recognizes safety in stillness. And somewhere nearby, a window remains slightly open, allowing warm air to drift outward, carrying with it the faint sound of pages turning, not quickly, not with purpose, but slowly, as though whoever is reading knows there is no reason to hurry. And this image mirrors the rhythm of the night itself, a rhythm that asks nothing more than patience. And perhaps you begin to feel that patience within yourself now, a softening of urgency, a willingness to let moments unfold without interference. And Rome seems to encourage this, offering no landmarks to chase, no highlights to seek, only the steady reassurance of continuity. And this reassurance can feel especially soothing when the mind has grown tired of navigating expectations, because it suggests that existence itself is enough, that simply being present in the quiet is a meaningful act. And as you breathe slowly, the boundaries between past and present begin to blur even further, not in a confusing way, but in a comforting one, as though time has decided to sit down beside you rather than stand over you. And in this shared rest, memories no longer feel heavy. They feel distant yet kind, like old companions who no longer need to speak to be understood. And Rome, ancient listener that it is, holds these companions gently, allowing them to remain without demanding their stories be retold. And this creates a space where you two can rest without explaining yourself, without reviewing the day, without planning the next, because the night has taken on the role of caretaker, watching quietly while you let go. And this letting go does not happen all at once. It happens in layers, just as the city itself was built, each layer settling naturally atop the last, until the weight becomes grounding rather than burdensome. And in this grounded state, there is a subtle shift, a feeling that you are not moving through the story anymore, but that the story is gently moving around you, carrying you without effort. And this is when the deepest calm often arrives, not with a sense of arrival, but with a sense of belonging, a quiet understanding that you are exactly where you need to be, held within a moment that asks nothing of you. And as this understanding settles, the city's listening presence remains steady and kind, preparing you for the next gentle unfolding, where even listening itself will begin to soften, and the boundary between awareness and rest will grow increasingly thin. As the night continues its gentle descent, there comes a moment when even listening begins to feel like effort. And Rome, ever attentive, seems to respond by offering something simpler still, a quiet assurance that nothing more is required. that the act of resting is not an interruption of life, but one of its most natural expressions. And if you imagine yourself now somewhere high above the streets, perhaps near an open terrace where the city stretches out beneath a sky softened by thin clouds, you might notice how the lights below no longer form distinct places, but blend together into a warm, scattered glow, like embers resting after a long fire. And this blending mirrors what happens inside the mind when it is allowed to settle. When sharp distinctions dissolve and thoughts lose their urgency, becoming part of a wider, calmer awareness. And long ago, others stood beneath this same sky, not searching for meaning, but finding comfort in repetition, in the knowledge that the stars return night after night. Indifferent to human concerns, yet quietly dependable. And Rome learned early how to live alongside that dependability, shaping its days and nights around rhythms that did not need constant attention, trusting that continuity itself was a form of stability. And as you breathe slowly now, perhaps you can sense that same trust beginning to form within you. A subtle confidence that the world will continue even if you stop watching it for a while, that nothing essential will be lost if you rest. And this realization often arrives gently, without fanfare, like a thought that feels less like thinking and more like remembering. And Rome seems to carry this memory in its very structure, in the way ancient roads still guide footsteps, in the way walls repaired countless times remain fundamentally the same, teaching by example that continuity does not depend on perfection, only on care. And somewhere below, a clock marks the passing hour, its sound distant and uninsistent, reminding no one in particular that time is moving, yet not demanding that anyone respond. And this uninsistent passage can feel deeply soothing, especially after days filled with reminders, deadlines, and decisions, because it suggests that time can exist without pressure, that it can flow without requiring constant participation. And as this idea settles, the body often follows, muscles loosening, breath deepening, the small tensions that accumulated unnoticed during the day beginning to release one by one. And Rome's steady presence that it is, remains unchanged by this release, holding space without comment, without expectation. And in that holding, there is a promise, quiet but reassuring, that rest does not separate you from life. It reconnects you to it, allowing you to experience continuity not as obligation, but as comfort. And this promise is echoed in the city's long history, in the countless generations who rested beneath these same skies, trusting that morning would arrive when it was ready, not because they willed it to, but because it always had. And this trust did not make them passive. It made them resilient, grounded in rhythms larger than individual concerns. And as you listen now, you may feel that grounding beginning to take hold, a sense that you are part of something ongoing and gentle, something that does not require constant effort to maintain. And this feeling can be especially comforting when the mind has grown tired of striving, because it suggests that belonging does not need to be earned. It is simply there, like the city itself, waiting patiently. And Rome seems to embody this truth as the night deepens, offering no conclusions, no final insights, only the steady reassurance of presence. And in this reassurance, the story itself begins to thin, not because it is ending, but because it is becoming less necessary, allowing space for silence to do what words no longer need to. And this is often the moment when awareness begins to drift naturally toward rest, not pushed, not guided, but gently carried by the understanding that everything essential continues quietly on its own. And as this understanding settles more fully, the path ahead grows softer, less defined, inviting you to follow not with attention, but with trust, into a deeper calm where continuity becomes something you feel rather than think, and where the night's promise of rest begins to feel complete. As the story continues to soften, there is a point where even the idea of journey begins to dissolve, and Rome no longer feels like a place you are moving through, but a presence that has gently settled around you, holding everything without effort. And if you imagine yourself now somewhere quiet and unseen, perhaps beneath a sky where clouds drift slowly enough to be almost still, you may sense how the night has gathered all remaining edges and smoothed them into something wide and forgiving. And this is often the moment when the mind stops searching for direction, when it realizes that nothing further needs to be reached, because the very act of resting is already complete. And Rome, with its centuries of patient existence, seems to embody this understanding perfectly, offering no grand conclusions, only the quiet assurance that all things, even unfinished ones, are allowed to pause. And long ago, people sensed this too, even if they never named it. They felt it when they lay down after long days, trusting the city to keep watch while they slept, knowing that walls and streets would remain. That morning would arrive gently, without needing to be summoned. And this trust was not naive. It was learned through repetition, through countless nights that passed without incident, reinforcing the sense that the world does not require constant vigilance in order to continue. And as you breathe slowly now, perhaps you can feel that vigilance easing. The subtle release of watchfulness that often lingers even when the body is tired. And Rome seems to respond to this release by growing quieter still. Not because there is less life, but because life has settled into its most sustainable rhythm. And somewhere far below, a door closes softly, not with finality, but with care. And the sound fades almost as soon as it appears, leaving behind a deeper silence that feels full rather than empty. And this fullness is important, because it allows the mind to rest without fear of missing something, knowing that whatever matters will still be there later. And this knowledge does not arrive as a thought, but as a feeling, a gentle certainty that spreads slowly like warmth. And Rome, having outlasted so much change, carries this certainty naturally, offering it to anyone willing to slow down enough to notice. And as you listen now, you may find that the words themselves begin to feel less distinct, blending together into a continuous flow, just as individual moments blend into memory over time. And this blending is not confusion, it is integration, a sign that awareness is shifting from sharp focus to something softer, more diffuse, more conducive to rest. And in this softened state, even the concept of history becomes less about sequence and more about presence, less about what happened and more about what remains. And what remains after centuries of living is not tension or urgency, but a quiet resilience, a steady endurance that asks nothing of those within it. And Rome offers this endurance generously, without asking to be admired or understood, simply by continuing to be. And this can feel deeply reassuring, especially when the mind has grown accustomed to measuring its worth through activity, because it suggests that existence alone carries value. That rest is not a break from meaning, but one of its expressions. And as this understanding settles further, the body often follows naturally, breath becoming slower, deeper, less intentional, muscles releasing without conscious instruction, and the sense of separation between listener and story grows thinner, until it is no longer clear where one ends and the other begins. And this is often the threshold of sleep, not marked by a sudden drop, but by a gradual fading, like the last lantern being dimmed somewhere behind you. And Rome attentive even now seems to acknowledge this transition with quiet respect, withdrawing nothing, adding nothing, simply allowing the night to do what it has always done. Hold everything gently until morning is ready to return. And in this holding there is no rush, no expectation, only the calm continuity of a world that knows how to wait. And as you drift further into this calm, the story itself becomes less necessary, less defined, preparing to give way to silence, where rest can complete its work without interruption. And this silence is not an ending, but a continuation of the same gentle rhythm that has carried the city, and now carries you toward a deeper, more effortless peace. As the night reaches its quietest depth, there is a subtle moment that often goes unnoticed, a moment when awareness loosens its grip just enough for rest to take over. And Rome seems to recognize this moment instinctively, responding not with sound or motion, but with a deeper stillness that feels almost protective. And if you imagine yourself now lying somewhere safe and undisturbed, perhaps beneath a ceiling that has watched countless nights pass without comment, you may sense how the city has withdrawn all unnecessary signals, leaving only what is essential: breath, warmth, and the gentle certainty of being held by something steady. And this certainty does not announce itself. It simply exists, like the presence of the earth beneath the stones, always there, whether noticed or not. And long ago, people reached this same moment at the end of long days, when thoughts grew less linear, when plans dissolved into impressions. And they trusted this transition without naming it, allowing sleep to arrive as a natural continuation rather than an event. and Rome learned to accompany them quietly, keeping watch not through vigilance but through endurance remaining, unchanged while individual lives rested within it. And as you listen now, the words may begin to feel softer around the edges, less insistent on meaning, more like a gentle current that carries you without, asking you to swim. And this is intentional, because rest does not require understanding. It requires permission, and Rome offers that permission generously, demonstrating through its own long existence that nothing falls apart when attention fades, that structures remain, rhythms continue, and life renews itself quietly. And this demonstration can be deeply reassuring, especially when the mind has grown accustomed to holding itself together through effort, because it suggests that letting go is not a risk, but a return. And as this idea settles, the boundary between thought and sensation begins to blur. And you may notice that your awareness drifts naturally toward physical sensations, the weight of the body, the gentle rise and fall of breath, the subtle warmth where you are resting. And these sensations do not demand focus, they simply provide an anchor, keeping you connected to the present moment without requiring analysis. And Rome, ancient companion in countless such moments, seems to align with this shift, offering no stories now, no images to follow, only the quiet reassurance of continuity. And somewhere beyond awareness, the city remains exactly as it has always been at this hour. Lanterns dim, streets empty, walls steady. And this constancy allows you to rest more deeply, knowing that nothing is changing suddenly, that the world is stable enough to allow sleep. And as you drift further, memories may appear briefly, then fade without significance. Thoughts may surface, then dissolve before forming conclusions. And this gentle fading is not loss, it is integration. The mind settling into a state where it no longer separates experiences into categories, but allows them to blend into a unified calm. And Rome seems to mirror this blending, perfectly past and present, indistinguishable in the dark. History no longer a sequence, but an atmosphere. And this atmosphere supports rest by removing the need to locate oneself in time, because sleep does not exist in chronology, it exists in presence. And as presence deepens, the sense of self often softens, becoming less defined, less concerned with edges, and more content to exist as part of a larger whole. And this is perhaps the greatest gift the night offers. A temporary release from individuality, a chance to dissolve gently into something wider and quieter. And Rome, having hosted countless sleepers over centuries, holds this dissolution respectfully, never intruding, never interrupting, simply remaining. And as the final threads of alertness begin to loosen, the story itself recedes naturally, not ending, but stepping aside, allowing silence to complete what words can only begin. And this silence is not empty. It is filled with the same steady presence that has carried you this far. And within it, sleep approaches not as an interruption, but as a continuation of the same gentle rhythm that has guided the city, the night, and now you, toward a state of rest that requires nothing more than letting go. At some point, without any clear signal, the night begins to loosen its hold just enough to allow true rest to take over. And Rome seems to understand this transition better than any place ever could, because it has witnessed it countless times, in countless lives, each one surrendering to sleep not as an escape, but as a return to something deeply familiar. And if you imagine yourself now at the very edge of wakefulness, where thoughts no longer form complete shapes and sensations soften into warmth and weight, you may sense how the city has stepped fully into the background, not disappearing, but becoming a steady presence that no longer needs attention. And this is the final gift of the night. The realization that you are supported even when awareness fades, that nothing requires your vigilance anymore. And long ago, people trusted this moment without hesitation, allowing the quiet to carry them onward, confident that the world would remain intact while they rested. And Rome honored that trust by doing exactly that, remaining, enduring, holding space through the hours of darkness until morning returned on its own gentle terms. And as you drift now, the story no longer needs to guide you, because your body and mind already know the way, following rhythms older than memory, rhythms that move naturally toward restoration. And any remaining thoughts lose their urgency, dissolving into impressions, colors, and sensations that drift without meaning or consequence. And this drifting is safe, because the night has removed all sharp edges, leaving only continuity, and Rome, ancient and patient, seems to offer one final reassurance, not in words, but in presence, that you are allowed to rest fully, that nothing is being missed, that life continues quietly whether you are watching it or not, and this reassurance settles deeply, allowing muscles to release completely, breath to slow without effort, and awareness to thin into something wide and peaceful. And if there is a feeling that remains, it is not curiosity or reflection, but gratitude, a subtle appreciation for this moment of calm, for the knowledge that even in a busy world, there are still places, real or imagined, that know how to be gentle, and Rome is one of them, offering its centuries of endurance as a quiet promise that rest is not fragile. It is reliable, returning night after night, generation after generation. And as sleep arrives fully now, the city recedes entirely, leaving behind only a sense of being held, not by story or sound, but by the simple continuity of existence. And this is where the journey completes itself, not with an ending, but with a soft release. As the night finishes its work and allows you to drift beyond words, beyond images, into a deep, natural rest, knowing that here no one rests alone. Every story has been a soft lantern in the dark, and even as consciousness fades, that lantern remains, quietly glowing until morning is ready to return. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself when you wake, and if you feel drawn to more peaceful nighttime journeys, don't forget to subscribe to TDU's History for Sleep, where rest is always waiting patiently for you.